Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome at the Fall Festival, welcome at Docks and the Gulliver Airship. I can see we have a full house, or I should say full airship. And this is because we have the honor to welcome here tonight the acclaimed, wonderful writer, Colum McCann. Please give him a warm welcome. Welcome, Colum. It's great to have you. I would also like to welcome two very distinguished guests who are actually the main protagonists of Colum's book, which is going to be presented and introduced to you tonight. And that is Rami Elhanan and Bassam Aramin, sitting here. I will not be speaking for long, but I just want to share with you a very personal memory, because I've been wanting to bring Colum on board this airship for some time. And of course, his busy schedule hasn't allowed it for a couple of years. But then, this spring, we traveled to New York, and with the help of our dear friend Bill Shipsey, who is sitting here, welcome Bill. We were able to meet, and we met at the Oyster Bar, remember, Colum, at the Grand Central. And I came, and the first minute, Colum looked at me and he said, "You don't have to say anything, I'm coming." So that was an easy mission, and that mission was made easy by Bill Shipsey. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Colum, for finding the time. I would also like to thank the Irish Embassy, who has been with us for this long time and has helped us to introduce Narrative 4, the wonderful project, the global initiative of story exchange and building empathy through story exchange that Colum has co-founded 10 years ago. And we're happy to be presenting and organizing these workshops with students, which are also part of the Fall Festival. We also have two wonderful guests here, Laura and her wonderful colleague from Limerick, Rachel. And last thing I want to say that we really have been waiting for this to happen, to be able to read Apeirogon in Czech, and that is thanks to Argo, the publishing house who has published the book and it came out just yesterday, hasn't it? A couple of days ago, so it's very fresh, and you'll be the first to be able to hear the stories, at least some short extracts from Apeirogon. I would also like to welcome Pavla Niklova, the wonderful translator of the book. Thank you, Pavla, for joining us. And last but not least, Hanna Zahradníková from Argo, who will be the chair of today's debate. Welcome, Hanna. So thank you all for being here. Enjoy the night. And I also want to say that on Saturday night, we'll be able to listen to the stories of Rami and Bassam with Colum. So I would like you to join us then, as well as for other events of Fall. Enjoy. Thank you.
Tak a já teď asi přepnu do češtiny, protože, jak už jsem říkala, dnešní večer se bude odehrávat v češtině a v angličtině, protože tady dnes křtíme české vydání románu Apeirogon. Míša už Columa McCanna trošku představila, jenom můžeme si ještě říct pro ty, kdo se s ním setkávají poprvé, že je to irský spisovatel, který v posledních letech žije v Americe. Hodně se zabývá vyprávěním příběhů a napsal x románů, za svůj román Let the Great World Spin, česky Co svět světem stojí, získal National Book Award v Americe a americkou národní knižní cenu. Pak následoval román Transatlantik, který nám se strašně líbil, ale měli jsme pocit, že není ten pravý pro české čtenáře. A teď jsme strašně rádi, že jsme mohli vydat v češtině román Apeirogon. Ještě bych ráda poděkovala některým partnerům. Je to Centrum irských studií na Karlově univerzitě na Filozofické fakultě v Praze. Ráda bych tady přivítala Aideen O'Connor z irského velvyslanectví, které pomáhá dlouhodobě nám vydávat irské knížky v češtině. Billa Shipsyho z Art for Human Rights už jsme přivítali a to je snad všechno a budeme se moct vrhnout rovnou na knížku. Column. Apeirogon is a shape with countably infinite number of sides. It's a fascinating image, and the book is a mirror of that, and I can imagine an infinite number of ways of describing that book. But first, I would like you to give the readers and the listeners here tonight some idea of what you think the book is about, what it's like.
Never ask the author what a book is about. I mean, seriously, that's true. You know, right? Because they'll say it's about $25, or they'll say it's about 400 pages, or something like that. No, really, what this book is about is these two men sitting here right now. And in November of 2015, I was with a group of artists and activists, and I was in a town called Beit Jala, which some of you know is just outside Bethlehem, quite close to Jerusalem. And it was the end of a long trip when we'd been traveling around, and my heart was already halfway broken listening to the stories and trying to understand what was going on in that part of the world. And we walked up into this sort of, it seemed like a residential tower, but there were office blocks there. And inside at a long table, sitting at either end with these green napkins and coffee cups in between them, were these two men. And I thought, okay, well, fair enough. I'm going to listen to who, and I didn't know their stories. Within half an hour, and they will tell you that I had my life turned completely sideways by listening to their stories, and I was. It felt like someone had opened up my rib cage and turned my heart backwards in extraordinary ways, and I wept, and I listened to them. And then afterwards, they wrote on this this green napkin, use the force of your grief as a weapon. And I stepped away from that day and I thought, well, I just met two extraordinary human beings who told their story about how they'd lost their daughters in separate incidents, and how they had become friends, and now how they used the force of stories and storytelling to change the world. And I went back to New York, and I thought, well, I can't really write about that because, well, I'm Irish. I live in New York. I'm a middle-aged white man. I'm not Muslim. I'm not Jewish. I have no history in that part of the world. And yet, I also knew, way down deep inside, that that a person writes towards his or her obsessions. And this became a sort of obsession for me, and I felt that I had to try and articulate this particular story. So I got in touch with Rami and Bassam, and I said, "Listen, would you let me write your story?" And they said, "Yeah." I was like, "But you have no idea. I'm a novelist. I make shit up, right?" And they're like, okay, yeah. And then they said to me something that was really profound. They said, if you can capture even just a tiny part of our story, you will have done everything that we need to do. And that gave me a license to think about them and to write about them in a way that was like free and to let my imagination go, to make some stuff up, to create a novel out of this. So I had a free sort of creative license, and yet try to be true to the essence of what they say and who they are. And I can tell you a little bit later on about like what sort of stuff I changed and what sort of stuff that we talked about. But I spent the next couple of years and went back and forth a couple of times to the West Bank, to Israel, and you know, I rode on Rami's motorbike at one stage. I walked through checkpoints with Bassam. I had dinner with their families. I sort of got to know them, and I thought about them, you know, deeply every day. And I thought about their daughters. Now, the thing was, I had a realization only about 2 years into the process. I wanted to call this novel a paragon, which is a shape with a countably infinite number of sides. But I realized that Bassam and Rami were telling the stories of their daughters because they wanted somehow to keep them alive. And then I thought, wow, well, who else does that but Scheherazade? And then I thought, okay, 1001. And so 1001 Nights, or Arabian Nights, whatever you choose to call it. So I decided to structure the book in 1001 different chapters. Now, this wasn't conscious. Like, don't let writers fool you. Writers don't know what they're doing. We go by the seat of our pants, and you hope that something is going to emerge. You're never fully conscious of what it is that you're doing, but you kind of hope that something or someone is going to whisper a music in your ears that is true to the texture of what is going on in the world. I felt like that happened with their stories, and we've been in communication ever since. I have to tell you, though, poignantly, I hadn't seen them until this morning for like over 3.5 years. The last time we saw each other was in New York when they came over for the publication of the book, which was right at the start of the pandemic, and we had to cancel our tour. But I feel like, well, we've been on Zoom together, and we've done all these things, and we've been on the phone together, and we've been on WhatsApp and whatever else. But I feel like that we weren't apart, and yet to see them and give them a hug today was like one of the great privileges. And then to be here, right? Can you imagine that? So they're coming from you know, the West Bank and Israel. I'm coming from New York via Ireland, and we're meeting here in Prague in this most incredible space. I mean, this is easily the most incredible space in which I've ever done, you know, a reading or a talk, or. But I've also walked around the museum, and I just thought, well, this place is really, really extraordinary in all sorts of ways. So to have the launch of A Paragon be here tonight, and also, can I just say, the bravery of the publishers to still call it A Paragon in Czech. It was something I kind of asked for, and the only language that changed it a little bit was Portuguese, where they called it A Paragono. But I think it's and then to sit with you after, you know, and I can't wait to hear your story about translating this, because I think that's a huge part of it, to bring the Czech voice, to bring the music here to this place. It feels to me like a great privilege, and I'm really delighted that everyone's here, and I thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was hoping for. I couldn't have imagined this way of description, because there are so many. teď tedy už máte nějakou úplně základní představu, ale ta knížka je opravdu jeden velký příběh, který se skládá z 1001 příběhu, tak abyste si udělali ještě lepší představu, tak vám z ní teď kousek přečteme. Ale ještě předtím vám řeknu, že si ji tady dnes večer v češtině také můžete koupit, až tady skončíme. A můžete si ji tady koupit s velikou slevou. Takže po skončení představení tamhle u stolu si můžete koupit knížku. A teď poprosím našeho milého hosta Kajetána Písařovice, aby vám ukázal, jak různá vyprávění se v Apeirogonu skrývají.
Should I read the chapters?
Okay, you're going to read from the very center of the book.
Kapitola 1001. Jednou, a není to tak dávno, ani takhle daleko, se Rami Alahan a Izraelec, Žid, designér, manžel, Nurit, otec Elika, Agáje a Igala a také zesnulé Sadar vypravil na svém motocyklu z předměstí Jeruzaléma do kláštera Kremisan v převážně křesťanském městě Beit Jala blízko Betléma v Judských horách, aby se setkal s Basamem Arimem, Palestincem, muslimem, bývalým vězněm, aktivistou, který se narodil nedaleko v Hebronu, manželem Salvy, otcem Arába a Arín a Muhammada a Ahmeda a Hiby a také zesnulé Abír, 10leté dívky, kterou zastřelil neznámý izraelský voják na hranici východního Jeruzaléma téměř 10 let poté, 2 týdny před jejími 14. narozeninami. Ramího dceru Samdar zabili 3 palestinští sebevražední útočníci. Bashar, Saváha, Jusuf, Šulí a Taufik Yasin z vesnice Asíra až Šímalia blízko Nábulusu na západním břehu Jordánu. Fascinujícího místa pro posluchače, kteří přijeli z končin od sebe tak vzdálených, jako je Belfast a Kyushu, Paříž a Severní Karolína, Santiago a Brooklyn, Kodaň a Terezín. A shromáždili se v klášteře z červených cihel, posázeném ve svahu ve svatých horách, u vinice na terasách ve stínu zdi. Jednoho obyčejného dne na konci října, mlhavého, chladného, aby si vyslechli příběhy Basama a Ramího a v jejich vyprávění našli další příběhy. Píseň písní. Našli sebe, tebe a mne. V kameny obložené kapli, kde sedíme celé hodiny, dychtiví, zoufalí a s nadějí a bezradní, cyničtí, provinilí, tiší, zavalení vzpomínkami, s nervy k prasknutí, v houstnoucí tmě. Vzpomínáme a posloucháme příběhy, které se teprve budou vyprávět.
Děkuji moc krát. A teď poprosíme, aby nám tu samou ukázku, kterou bohužel nemáte na monitoru, přečetl Colum McCann.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just read the second part. And you know, amongst the key words here are the idea that these men have gone to a monastery in Beit Jala and they're telling their stories, but they're telling their stories to you and to me. And one of the things about this book was I was about 2.5, almost 3 years into it. I was like, who is the narrator of this book? Now, you'd think that a writer might know that sort of stuff beforehand, but no, I had no clue who the narrator of the book was. And then it was in writing this passage that I realized that the narrator of the book is actually the reader of the book. And so that's why I use the phrase you and me. So I'll just read the second half of that. So we're in a place of intrigue to the listeners gathered in the red brick monastery, perched on the hillside, in the mountains of the beloved, by the terraced vineyard, in the shadow of the wall, having come from the far part as Belfast and Kyushu, Paris and North Carolina, Santiago and Brooklyn, Copenhagen and Terezin. On an ordinary day, at the end of October, foggy, tinged with cold, to listen to the stories of Bassam and Rami, and to find within their stories another story, a song of songs, discovering themselves, you and me, in the stone-tiled chapel where we sit for hours, eager, hopeless, buoyed, confused, cynical, complicit, silent, our memories imploding, our synapses skipping, in the gathering dark, remembering while listening all of those stories that are yet to be told. Thank you.
A teď poprosím Kajetána ještě o jednu pasáž, abyste viděli, jak tahle knížka funguje a jak se ten příběh skládá.
Kapitola 3. Každý rok zaplní nebe nad kopci Beit Jala 500 milionů ptáků. Táhnou po dávných trasách dudkové, drozdi, lejskové, pěnice, kukačky, špačci, ťuhýci, jespáci, bělořiti, čejky, strdmilové, rorýsy, vrabci, lelkové, sovy, rackové, jestřáby, orlové, luňáci, jeřáby, káňata, pysíci, pelikáni, plameňáci, čápy, bramborníčci černobílí, supy bělohlaví, mandelníci hajní, tymálie šedé, vlhy, hrdličky, pěnice bělokřídlé, konipasy luční, pěnice černohlavé, rudokrké lindušky, bukáčkové malí. Je to druhá nejfrekventovanější migrační superdálnice na světě. Nejméně 400 druhů ptáků se v různých výškách prožene po nebi. Dlouhá véčka připravená zakejat. Osamělí kočovníci klouzající těsně nad travinami. Při pohledu dolů se každý rok rýsuje nový vzhled krajiny. Izraelské osady, palestinské paneláky, střešní zahrady, kasárna, bariéry, objezdy. Někteří ptáci se přesouvají v noci, aby se vyhnuli dravcům. Řídí se hvězdami. Jsou tak rychlí, že jsou téměř neviditelní. Za letu stravují vlastní svaly a vnitřnosti. Jiní cestují ve dne a využívají vzestupných proudů horkého vzduchu. Nechávají se nadnášet a plachtí v teplém větru. Stává se, že ptačí mračna zakryjí slunce a vrhnou na Beit Jala stíny, na pole, strmé terasy i olivové háje na předměstích. Když si v jakoukoliv denní hodinu léhnete ve vinici kláštera Kremisa, uvidíte nad hlavou ptáky, potující ve štěbetavých drahách. Usedají na stromy, telegrafní sloupy, elektrické vedení, vodojemy, dokonce i na okraji zdi, kde se mohou stát cílem mladíků házejících kameny.
Děkuji.
So can I just say that the function of that paragraph, the function of that paragraph, or that canto, if you will, is to say that we're all birds, and in a certain way we all fly over Jerusalem. I mean, this is a point of the world where all these cultures collide, where all these continents collide, and these birds, they fly over this pathway, and they're bringing stories from everywhere. They're bringing stories from South Africa, they're bringing stories from Ireland, from Sweden, from whatever it happens to be. And you know, I stumbled upon the notion of birds because I just was traveling through Beit Jala and I saw a bird ringing center, and I said, what the hell is a bird ringing center? I had no idea. Taluta Kumi in Beit Jala, and then I went and spent a couple of days there, and they use these mist nets to grab these birds out of the air, and then they tag them. And the idea of tagging a bird was really interesting to me. But also the fact the birds do not recognize borders. They do not, and they fly above this place in extraordinary ways, but yet we all sort of travel there too.
Příběhy se vyznačují tím, že se vyprávějí pořád dál. Vyprávějí je další a další lidé, mění se, stávají se důležitými pro další. Tady v našem případě příběh Bassama a Ramiho vyprávěl Colum, a abyste vy si ho mohli poslechnout, tak ho musela převyprávět Pavla Niklová, která ho pro nás přeložila do češtiny. Jak už jste jistě pochopili, tahle kniha má hodně široký záběr. Setkáváme se tam s historií, politikou, dějinami literatury, ornitologií, zbrojním průmyslem. Byli bychom tady až do rána, kdybych měla vyjmenovat všechna ta témata, což pochopitelně pro překladatele musí být velmi složité. A k tomu je tam ještě samozřejmě styl, rytmus. Je tam toho opravdu hodně. Pavlo, mohla byste nám říct něco o tom, jak jste se s tím vším vyrovnávala?
Já děkuji za vaši otázku. Já bych napřed chtěla poděkovat moc Columovi vůbec za tu krásnou knížku, kterou napsala, za to, že díky té knížce se příběh Ramiho a Bassama šíří po světě velkou rychlostí a že by byla přeložená do mnoha jazyků, a já jsem moc šťastná, že dnes vychází v češtině. A zároveň bych chtěla poděkovat nakladatelství Argo, Haně a taky Martinovi Svobodovi, nevím, jestli tady je, dvou teda úžasným editorům a kouzelníkům, kteří měli obrovskou trpělivost a čistili můj text s velkou pečlivostí a opravdu vrtali úplně ve všem a to bylo dobře. Takže já doufám, že se vám knížka bude líbit. A já jsem, když jsem udělala první verzi toho překladu, asi po 3 měsících, tak pak jsem se spojila s Columem a vlastně jsem se optala, jestli má nějakou radu, aspoň jednu, kterou by mi dal, co se týká toho překladu. A tak on říkal, všechno je to hudba. A že vlastně si připadal, a že se nechce cítit zas tak jako vznešeně, ale že si připadal chvílemi jako dirigent, který diriguje symfonii. A je pravda, že já jsem z té knížky cítila, že ta symfonie mi tam vlastně opravdu seděla, že tam jsou, až uvidíte tu strukturu, jsou tam krátké pasáže nebo sloky. A takže je to jako kdyby tam hrál jeden nástroj potichu a pak se přidávali další a prostě to nabírá na síle a pak vlastně koncem té knížky se to zase stišuje. Ta knížka je vlastně jeden den taky svým způsobem jenom. Takže ten rytmus je tam důležitý. A angličtina je velmi melodický jazyk, čeština tak melodická není, ale tak já doufám, že se nám podařilo tam společně nějaký ten rytmus a tu melodii a tu hudbu udržet a že ta knížka takhle jako plyne. A teď vlastně, když přiletěl Rami s Bassamem, tak jsme se bavili o tom, že teď bude knížka vycházet v hebrejštině a vlastně oni říkali, byli úplně zničení, že tu knížku museli předělávat společně, protože ta hudba a ten rytmus bylo přesně to, co se v tom původním hebrejském překladu ztratilo. Takže je to asi jedna z těch důležitých. Samozřejmě je důležité předat ten příběh, ale ten rytmus a ta hudba tam je. A taky si vybavuju, že Colum říkal jednou při nějakém rozhovoru, že po něm chtěli, že musel definovat, jestli je to román nebo jestli je to literatura faktu. A vlastně by se to dalo nazvat, sám tomu říká, že tam jsou, jestli to jsou kapitoly nebo jestli to jsou sloky, takže by to zároveň mohla být vlastně dlouhá epická báseň. Takže ta forma je velmi specifická a unikátní a to je na tom krásné. A konkrétně k těm problémům toho překladu jste slyšeli ten jeden úryvek, co četl Kajetán o všech těch ptácích, tak je tam pár takových nelehkých kapitol, ale zrovna ti ptáci ještě šli docela překládat, protože tam si lze pomoct tím latinským jménem toho ptáka, takže tam jsme se, myslím, tam dostali. Ale když jsem se poprvé blížila ke konci té knížky, tak jsem si říkala, dobrý, ještě 2 stránky a už to mám. A pak je tam kapitola nebo sloka 3 ze zadu, že pak zase to číslování jde dolů a tam Kolam zmiňuje 30 názvů pro pasiáns. A prostě jak se říká pasiáns v různých řečích a na různých místech po světě. A tam jsem se zarazila strašně dlouho na téhle jedné věci a zkoušela jsem najít v Čechách nějaké spolky lidí, kteří hrají karty, ale musím říct, že jsem se dostala, jenom jsem se dovolala do nějaký hospody v jižních Čechách, jako, kde to vypadalo, že to je nějaký spolek, ale řekli mi ne, tady prostě nějaký chlapi chodí jako si zahrát karty a to je všechno, takže to jsme tam pak nějak přeložili a nevím, jestli je to přesně nebo ne. A pak další věc, Kolam miluje jakoby popis určitého procesu, jak se něco dělá. A jedna taková, to je na začátku ta věc, tam je, jak se staví, z čeho se dělá prak, nebo dřív dělal a dneska dělá a jak se s ním zachází. To byla jedna věc a pak je tam třeba taková pro mě náročná věc, popisuje, jak funguje puška, z které teda střílí ty gumové projektily. A tohle třeba já jsem to přeložila, ale to mi ten Martin opravdu vrátil, to bylo úplně červený, co mi vrátil a říkal, no to prostě by nikdy nefungovalo takhle. A takže tam se ukázalo, že já opravdu ten technický typ asi nejsem, ale Martin to krásně doladil. A ještě jedna takováhle krásná pasáž tam je o tom, jak mniši právě v klášteře Kremisan, kde ten den Rami a Basam mají tu svoji přednášku, tak jak tam stavějí sudy na víno ze svaté země, tak to bylo taky moc krásné, tomu jsem taky vůbec nerozuměla, jak se musí to dřevo vlastně postupně řezat a dávat dohromady. A ještě, už nebudu díl mluvit, ale ještě bych chtěla říct, že nejkrásnější, co se mi jakoby překládalo nejlíp, co mi právě přišlo, že to jakoby že ta slova sama přicházejí, tak to byly pasáže, kde Kolam popisuje Basamovi a Ramiho vzpomínky z jejich života. A ta jedna třeba je krásná, je když Basam se poprvé potkal se svou budoucí ženou, kterou prostě neviděl nikdy a přijde do rodiny, kde je 20 lidí a najednou jsou sami a Basam se přejedl, protože nechtěl nikoho urazit, takže sotva sedí a dýchá, ale nicméně asi za 2 týdny nebo za 2 měsíce se vzali. Tak to jsem měla pocit, jako, že to jde samo vlastně. A pak třeba krásná taková podobná pasáž je, když Rami vzpomíná na narozeniny dědečka Smadar a jak mu Smadar vlastně, protože to je natočené na videu, jestli si to dobře vzpomínám, tak ta je krásná. A pak teda velmi silná pasáž, tahleta vzpomínková, je, když Rami ho povolali do Jomkipurské války a on tam teda popisuje, jak pro ně neměli vybavení nic a dostal jenom jednu starou pušku a jedou na transportéru, který má opravovat jiné tanky, ale ten jejich transportér se rozbije a nemá ho kdo opravit a dál už nebudu pokračovat, abych to neskazila.
Tam jste mě připomněla vlastně 2 věci. Jedna je, že ti ptáci opravdu jsou důležitý a když se tenhle román čte z ptačí perspektivy, když se díváte na to všechno současně, tak si myslím, že to může hodně pomoct. A pak ta scéna, kterou Pavla připomínala o tom, jak Smadar přeje dědečkovi k narozeninám, tak ta například úplně zamotala hlavu naší konzultantce na arabštinu, protože Smadar tam říká přípitek arabsky, ale ta arabistka říká, já teda si nejsem vědomá, že by se to takhle jako používalo, to se mi nějak nezdá. Já jsem říká, ano, protože to je vlastně ta holčička, ta to říká trošku z žertu tomu dědečkovi, je to celé posunuté. Ten proces překladatelský zamotal hlavu spoustě různým lidem, ze spousty různých oborů.
To bych ještě chtěla vlastně poděkovat všem lidem, kteří se podíleli na přepisu do češtiny, na přepisu všech těch jmen. A taky ještě vlastně, co se týká toho překladu, já jsem si od začátku myslela, že bychom neměli přechylovat ženská jména. Tam jsme měli vlastně jediný takový diskuzi s Hanou a s Argem, jestli ano nebo ne, protože ve většině knížek se to stále dělá a mně to pořád přišlo, že to jméno, když se k tomu přidá ta koncovka ová, takže už to nebude vlastně jako ten člověk, kterého jsem z té knížky znala, a nakonec mě velmi potěšilo, že Hana při posledním čtení řekla, že jí to vůbec nevadí, že tam ty koncovky nejsou, a takže máte v ruce knížku, kde ta jména jsou taková jako v originále.
Tak a já bych teď ráda se zeptala znovu Koluma. Sorry, I would like to ask you, because the situation we have here tonight, for me at least, is very exceptional. I think it's exceptional for everyone, because the two main protagonists of the book are sitting here witnessing this talk tonight. It must be very strange to write a novel, yet you have touched on that, but I'm just fascinated. What is it like to write a novel about two real living people, and how did you interact? How was it for Rami and Bassam? It must have been a hard process, I imagine.
They hated the whole thing. Now here's the deal. Look, this is the question of our times, and in particular in the last 20 years, and maybe even more so in the past 5 years. You know, what is true and what is not true? What is a fact and what is a mercenary idea that gets sent off to a place that you don't want to go? What should the artist do in order to get to what I would call a deep textural truth? And so for me, you know, I don't think we should call books fiction or non-fiction. I think that works for libraries or Library of Congress or some sort of idea. But ultimately what we're talking about, and at this festival, we're talking about stories. And what is a story? And this is a really difficult thing to find. There's no simple answer. But I do think that stories are the molecules upon which we are built. And so my job was to try and be as honest as possible to Rami and Bassam's experience. And my job therefore was to put you, the reader, sort of in their shoes, to feel uncomfortable or to feel joy or to feel grief or any of these different things that go on in the novel, and to say something as honestly as I possibly could. Now, there's very little in the book actually made up, but there are lots of so for example, I traveled with this crazy man on the back of his bicycle. Bicycle, thank God it wasn't a bicycle, his motorbike, right? Yeah, and he drives really well. He's a good driver. I used to drive a motorbike, so I felt very comfortable on his motorbike. So we're going through the streets of Jerusalem. We went out to Beit Jala, and we're on, and this was all wonderful. But when I came to sit down to write about it, I wanted the reader to be on that motorbike too, with him. And the fact of the matter is, he drives a great bike, a big, powerful bike, but it's boring because it's a fucking automatic. And I was like, oh no! But I wanted it to be a bike with gears. The reason I wanted it to be a bike with gears is because I wanted to use the word clutch. Yeah. I wanted to use first to second. I wanted to use the revometer. I wanted it so that we feel as readers that we're on the bike. So it's a lie, but it's the truth. Now, this is really important to who we are and where we happen to be politically, and more in so many ways in the 21st century. It's the job of the artists, or all of us, to be able to actually find the deep truth of the experience, because there's a difference between factual truth and absolute honesty. And then there were other things. So, for example, this young man goes on hunger strike. Bassam goes on hunger strike in prison, and he did. He went on hunger strike in prison. And I talk about it, but then I invented a scene where there's a sweet, a piece of candy. Obviously, it tied back into the fact that his daughter was buying candy just before she was killed. There was all these metaphorical things going on in my head. But I wanted him to end the hunger strike with a piece of candy, which is kind of shocking. And it had to be a mint. And the line in the book is, as you know, the taste of the mint was sort of it was alarmingly minty. And the reason I did that was because I wanted the reader to be kind of shocked, because we all know what mint tastes like, especially if you haven't had food in 17 days, which I believe that's what it was. And so that's a change. But is it a lie, or is it a thing that's a manipulated truth that goes towards the proper truth? And I think that this is, for me anyway, this is one of the great questions of where we are now. And the truth is messy. And one of the things about the start of the book, and I'll just say this very briefly, is the start of the book is very confusing. You got birds, you have Mitterrand, you have weapons manufacture, you have all of these different things. And I wanted the book to be very confusing at the beginning. The reason I wanted the book to be confusing was, not only was I confused, but I think we're all confused. And I also think we're afraid to say, I don't know. And I wanted the reader to surrender herself or himself or themselves to their confusion. And once you surrender to the confusion, and you're no longer throwing facts and saying, Israel is this border and Palestine is this border and what happened here, then you get to the human heart of things. And this, to me, is the most important thing. So the book was attempting to find the human heart of their stories by, using a sort of poetry, if you will, or manipulating certain things in order to tell hopefully, and they were very generous. Rami did call me and said, "You got me on the wrong motorbike." I think, well, it's not up to me to say, because we will be talking about this on Saturday night and the whole process. But can I give you the microphone for just a second? I mean, either one of you, like just in relation to how you felt about whether the novel was truthful or not.
Well, this is quite embarrassing, I'm afraid. And to tell you the truth, when he came to us, Callum, and asked permission to write our story, we said okay, because we had many stories written about us, and many movies were done about us, and it was an ordinary thing. I did not expect him getting under my skin. And when he sent us, the drafts, I used to read the first 2 lines and said, okay. Because I know my story, and Bassam knows his story. The first time I really read it was on the plane, on my way to the United States, on March 2020. And I was mesmerized. I was overwhelmed. The feeling was as if I'm listening to myself being recorded. And the sound was very strange. But then I started reading about the rubber bullets and the birds and the layers and the Scheherazade thing, and I found myself diving into it in a way that seldom happens to me when I read books. And I thought to myself, it's a masterpiece. And his ability to touch and understand our pain and to describe it in a way that makes me feel that I'm standing aside was overwhelming. When I get out of the plane, I told him this is a masterpiece. The only thing that I cannot live with is this motorcycle that I don't drive such motorcycles, and it's okay, but some story is much worse.
In fact, I just discovered that he wrote about the hunger strike and the candy because I didn't read this book. Do you believe that? It was very difficult for me, especially when you read about how he described the pain. It's unbelievable. I don't know what to say. You know, as Callum said in the beginning, he said that I'm a novelist and I want to write a book about you. But I said, yeah, it's okay. He said, you don't understand. In fact, I don't understand, yes. So I said, it's okay, go for it. Then I discovered after that he's a very famous writer. Oh my God. So I start to behave. I discovered that he wrote that when I meet my wife until we get married, it's 34 days, which is too much. Because the truth is, it's 31 days.
So I got it wrong.
So Callum, in fact, we will remain thankful for you. You teach me that if you feel your own pain, it's a sign that you are alive. If you feel the pain of the others, it's a sign that you are a human being. Thank you.
I would like to add 2 words, with your permission, about translation. The first time I really read the book is when I took the Hebrew translation into my hand, and I felt that the music have gone. And I found myself with my wife. She turned my attention to this loss of poetic notion of the book, and we went through every line, every sentence, every dot, every phrase, everything, and then I realized what you did, which made it a masterpiece, because the layers, the nuances of the behavior and the terms and everything, you need to think about every dot in the book in a way that is extraordinary and makes it a masterpiece.
Can I just say one thing? Like, people ask me, was it painful to write this book? Yeah, it was painful to write this book. But it was nothing. I had to remind myself every time I sat down to think about suicide bombers and rubber bullets and you know, hitting the back of someone's cranium, and that my pain was absolutely nothing in comparison to the pain that Rami, Bassam and their families and their extended families actually felt. And that was one thing that kept me going. Yeah. And also, can I just also say about translation? I mean, this is my co-author, and that's really important.
Já jsem měla samozřejmě podobné pocity a myslím si, že zažívat tu bolest je důležité, protože vlastně my se tady dnes scházíme v rámci festivalu Fall, který se hodně zaměřuje na příběhy, a ty příběhy mají sloužit zvýšení empatie. to sdílení příběhů má přispět k tomu, že si dovedeme představit životy jiných, že se dovedeme podívat na svět jejich očima. A já si myslím, že díky románu Apeirogon Columa McKenna se nám tohle může podařit velice dobře. A možná teď je ten pravý čas, abychom si z něj poslechli další ukázku.
Kapitola 73. Majitelka obchodu se jmenovala Níša Prastará, přestože jí bylo pouhých 34 let. Slyšela rány. 1, 2, 3, 4. Skřípot pneumatik. A na okamžik se rozhostilo ticho. Ruce se jí zastavily na dlouhém dřevěném pultu a pak povyk. Vysoké hlasy školáků, hlavně dívek, což bylo neobvyklé. Dívky bývaly obvykle tiché. Níša se natáhla pro klíče od pokladny. Venku bylo pozdvižení. Na chodníku leželo dítě. Modrá sukně, bílá bavlněná halenka s límečkem, odhozená bota. Níša klesla na kolena. Věděla, jak se dívka jmenuje. Sklonila se, aby jí zkontrolovala puls. Prober se, Abír, prober se. Ozývaly se výkřiky. Nad dítětem se zhlukl dav. Byla v bezvědomí. Muži a ženy mačkali telefony, aby chytili signál. Rozneslo se, že vojáci na druhém konci silnice zablokovali dopravu. Nikdo nemohl projet, ani sanitky, policie, záchranáři. Prober se, prober se. Uplynulo několik minut. Mladá učitelka přešla přes kruhový objezd, naříkala. Zastavil otlučený taxík. Mladý řidič mával rukama, děti se valily ze školní brány. Níša pomohla Abír zvednout ze země a uložit jí na zadní sedadlo taxíku. Vklínila se do prostoru mezi předním a zadním sedadlem, aby se dítě neskutálelo. Řidič se ohlédl přes rameno a taxík se strhnutím rozjel. Někdo hodil dozadu do auta ztracenou botu. Níša jí nazula Abír na nohu. Ucítila teplo jejich prstů. Hned věděla, že na to překvapivé teplo lidského těla nikdy nezapomene. Taxík se řítil středem tržiště. Po Anatě a Šuafátu se už všechno rozneslo. Z mešit, balkónů a postranních uliček se ozývalo volání. Z průchodů vybíhaly děti. Valily se proudem dolů ke škole. Řidič brzdil jen na retardérech. Na druhé straně tržiště narazil na zácpu. Položil ruku na klakson. Okolní auta se přidávala k pekelné symfonii. Níša spočívala pod Abír na podlaze taxíku, natahovala se nahoru a držela dětskou hlavu, aby se nehýbala. Abír se zachvěly oči. Nevydávala žádné zvuky. Tep měla pomalý a nepravidelný. Níša se znovu dotkla prstů na nohách. Schladly. Taxík měl stažená okýnka. Zvenku bylo slyšet tlampače, objevily se vlajky, předzvěst nepokojů. Auto poskočilo dopředu, řidič vzýval Aláha, Níše z té vřavy zvonilo v uších. Zanedbaná nemocniční budova se krčila u země, personál už čekal na schodech. Níša sundala ruku Abír z hlavy a otevřela zadní dveře ještě dřív, než taxík zastavil. Začali volat, že je potřeba pojízdné lůžko. Na vstupním schodišti nemocnice panoval chaos. Níša sledovala, jak vozík mizí v záplavě bílých plášťů. Dny malých rubášů. Viděla jich už tolik, jak je nesou ulicemi. Najednou si vzpomněla, že zapomněla zamknout dveře obchodu. Přiložila si předloktí k očím a rozplakala se. Kapitola 74. Kamery ve vzducholodi se lehce otáčely za objekty a zářily. Nad Anatou už kroužily vrtulníky. Kapitola 75. Dole pod nimi házely skupinky mladíků kameny. Přistávali na střechách. Odráželi se od sloupů veřejného osvětlení. Třískali do vodovodních nádrží.
Já, Kajetáno, poprosím ještě o jednu kapitolu. 76.
V den, kdy zabili Smadar, byly televizní kamery na místě dřív než záchranáři Zaka. Rami viděl část záběrů o několik let později v dokumentárním filmu. Venkovní restaurace, odpolední světlo, zmateně bloumající osoby, převrácené židle, nohy od stolů, roztříštěné lustry, postříkané ubrusy, přervaný trup jednoho z atentátníků uprostřed ulice, připomínající řecké torzo. Jen poslouchat se zavřenýma očima bylo nesnesitelné. Zrychlené kroky, sirény. Po skončení projekce si uvědomil, že tak pevně svíral ruce, až si je nehty rozdrásal do krve. Přál si, aby se filmaři nějak vplížili dovnitř času a přetočili ho. Zastavili. Vrátili. A nasměrovali jej někam úplně jinam, jako v Borgesově povídce. Aby světlo bylo jasnější. A židle byly srovnané a ulice uklizená, kavárna nedotčená a Smadar najednou zase šla kolem. S krátkými vlasy, propíchnutým nosem, zavěšená do kamarádek. Její Walkman vdechoval ostrou vůni kávy, zachycené v banálním nezájmu o to, co se dál stane.
Thank you. Can I just say to those English speakers, I'll just read the last few lines of that, and because it's about Rami watching a documentary years later, and he goes to a screening, and then he says, or I say, or the narrator say, or we say, you and I say, what he wanted the filmmakers to do was to somehow crawl inside time and rewind it, to upend chronology, reverse it, and channel it in an entirely different direction, like a Borges story, so that the light was brighter and the chairs were righted and the street was ordered, the cafe was intact, and Smadar was suddenly walking along again. Her hair short, her nose pierced, arm in arm with her schoolgirl friends, sauntering past the cafe, sharing her Walkman, the smell of coffee sharp in her nostrils, caught in the banality of not caring what happens next. What's important to me about that, for several different reasons, is what an Irish hero of mine who died last month was a hero to Smadar, Sinead O'Connor. And in this particular story, we don't know what Smadar was listening to as she walked through the marketplace, but in my imagination she was listening to Nothing Compares to You. And we lost Sinead O'Connor last month, but I saw Sinead O'Connor on RTE, which is the national television station, on the Late Late Show years later, sing Nothing Compares to You in a hijab. And I thought, wow, the world comes around. And Abir and Smadar were upstairs somewhere looking down and singing along with that song. It was a poignant moment.
We started half an hour later, but we are moving towards the end, slowly but surely. Before I open the floor for questions, I would like to ask you about the reception of the novel, because the stories you're telling are difficult to tell and pretty difficult to take too, even though it's important, as we said. How do people react to novel, and is it different in different places, or is there like a universal reaction? And has there been a reaction which surprised you, which you hadn't expected?
You know, I'm going to say that the reaction was pretty extraordinary. You know, every now and then I got a kicking around, and that's all right. You know, you sort of expect it with a book like this. But the letters that I get from parents in particular who've gone through similar things, and then the reaction I get from people, and then the reaction that Rami and Bassam get in different places around the world, I think speaks not to my novel, but to the deep truth of their own story, and how offensive it is that we live in such a world that allows this sort of thing to happen, to take away and how somehow we just gloss over it as if they're a statistic, but they're not a statistic. You know, they never will be. And one of the things for me was, you know, acknowledging, as I said earlier, that Bassam and Rami were keeping the girls alive. Well, one of the things for me was, well, maybe I got a chance to keep them alive then too. And I think these stories have to be told over and over and over again, and it pisses some people off, yeah. And so they weren't going to publish it in Hebrew, and you know, and then there's we have an Arabic translation on the way, but there are difficulties. People step in and get upset about these things, and some people say, well, you didn't, you know, write enough about the Holocaust, and some people say, well, you wrote too much about the Holocaust. And look, in the end, I think the reaction to this was, for me, exactly what I wanted it to be. And when I envisioned the book, in fact, like early on, I said to my editor, like, if we ever do an ad, let's get all the pro-Apeirogon quotes on one side and the anti-Apeirogon quotes on the other side, because this is going to rattle people up. Look, the only things worth doing is the things that disrupt people and possibly break your heart. And I think that the job of the artist now is to do those sort of things and to see where the disruption, and then step out of the debate. I have nothing to say. By the way, we're going to do questions. I have nothing to say about Israel and Palestine and politics. What I will talk about is the deep human instinct. And, oh my God, like going to places like Beit Sahur and being invited into people's homes, going to Jerusalem and being and the magnificent reaction I got from people in general, and it's not fashionable and it's not cool to talk about the human spirit as something that's vibrant and alive. But guess what? It actually is, and that was one of the things that I learned about. You know, am I an optimist or a pessimist? I'm probably a pes-optimist, right? I have a bit of both in me, but I like the notion that you can be a pessimist of reality, that's life staring you in the face, and then you can also be an optimist of the will. And that's what I got from these men, right? That's what I got from them. The ability to talk about the shit and the grime and the everyday torments and all the darkness, and yet still somehow come out of it and say there is some form of hope. Not too fashionable, especially nowadays, but I do believe eventually in some form of hope. And can I also say, I think this is important, that these two fellas are quite funny as well, right? So there's a whole sketch about the, from an Israeli TV thing. But when they came to New York that time before they just came back, and this is one of my last memories of them, we went to the 92nd Street Y. It was lashing rain outside. We went down to a restaurant just down the road, and we're all in our big heavy coats. We were wet, and Bassam and Rami were sitting beside each other, and we were all tight in these tables, and Rami was trying to take his jacket off, and Bassam just reached across and gently sort of helped him take his jacket off and said, "Haven't the Jews suffered enough?"
And I know we don't have time, but so very short memory, or when I translated, when I did the first draft of the book, then I started thinking the same thing as Hannah mentioned. These are real people, and I know so much about them. I should introduce myself to them as well. And so I asked Colum what he thought about it, and he connected us, and I wrote to them, and Rami, I think, answered in like 2 hours, and he said, "Hi, Pavla, sure, come, we're rolling out the red carpet for you." And we had a great time together, short but wonderful. I traveled with my son, who I'm sorry can't be here tonight, but they took us to one of their talks in a kibbutz called Neve Shalom, which is halfway between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And it's a kibbutz, and please correct me if I'm wrong, where Arabs and Jews have been living together for like 50 years. I think you called it like that. No, it's a village, or yeah, no. And it was wonderful. You gave a talk to a group of French students, and then 2 memories happened that I will never forget. Because of course Rami asked, "What do you want to see?" I said, "Well, I'd like to see as many things that Colum writes about in the book, but I don't know what's possible and what is not." And Rami took us to the graveyard where Smadar is buried, and I really appreciated your trust. We saw each other for the first time, and you took us there, and it's a beautiful place. It's a kind of forest or garden, and it's difficult to get there through stones, and Colum magnificently described it in the book. And the second memory that always keeps coming back is then when we drove back to Jerusalem, and we stopped at the foot of a small hill, and we dropped off Bassam, and he walked up the hill to the checkpoint, which is surrounded by the wall and barbed wire, and then he was gone. And that's, well, I know he doesn't want to mention that, so that's why I omitted. But it was just, so I believe that, I hope that with this book, it can't stay like that. People, it's just impossible to live like that. And so that one day the wall and the wires will be gone.
He said, "I knew, and I told him so, that we had to behave nicely."
Děkujeme. Je v povaze téhle knihy a těch lidí, co se tady dnes sešli, dál povídat a sdílet ty svoje příběhy, ale my to teď musíme přerušit. Můžete určitě pokračovat, každý si můžete někoho chytit a v tom povídání pokračovat, až tady vyklidíme Gullivera. Jenom úplně na závěr, já bych ještě ráda poděkovala všem lidem, kteří se na vzniku toho českého vydání podíleli, všem lidem z Arga i našim spolupracovníkům, hlavně pak z těch, kdo tady doufám jsou, grafikovi Danielu Trojanovi, technickým redaktorům Saše Švolíkové a Milanu Dorazilovi, samozřejmě našemu panu řediteli Geniovi Gelnarovi, že nám dovolil tuhle krásnou knihu udělat, kolegům, kteří, když já jsem nad něčím přemýšlela, tak mi s tím pomáhali. A doufám, že jsem na někoho nezapomněla. Děkuji všem, kdo téhle knize pomáhali na svět, a samozřejmě mé velké díky patří za dnešní večer DOXu. Přijďte v sobotu na další pořad a přijďte na další pořady festivalu Fall. Děkuji moc krát Kajetánu Písařovicovi, že nám přečetl ukázky a přiblížil nám tu knížku. Děkuji moc krát tlumočnici Janě Žurkové za to, že vám pomohla všemu rozumět. Děkuji samozřejmě velice Ramimu Elhananovi.
Thank you for the reading, for bringing the music. Thank you for bringing the music, and thank you for facilitating this evening. And please do look at Narrative 4 if you get a chance. We want to build it up in the Czech Republic, and I appreciate any support that you can give, and then look after all the causes that Rami and Bassam are involved in, especially the Parents Circle. Thank you.